Good morning. Welcome to the garden. I'm glad you're joining us here today. And I want to say a special word of thanks to Bob Blake for filling in last week. So I had the Sunday after Easter off. It was really nice. And did a great job, I thought. And I got this strange text from Dana, I believe. I don't know where she is, that had some folks singing happy birthday to somebody. Was that you? Okay. Well, thank you. Anyway, this is one I really didn't want to acknowledge very much. So, in fact, from here on, I don't plan to acknowledge them at all. So, assuming there are here-ons. So, and I want to also say thanks to Mary. That was a beautiful prayer, and I do hope that as we're all in the process of this transition, that we do keep the garden and its leadership and all of us in prayer as we move forward into a new part of our lives. Together and separately, so I'm glad for that. This is the time that is traditionally known as spring cleaning time, at least in the past, in years gone by. It used to be recognized that way. And I can tell you, when I was a kid, I could tell it was spring without ever looking at the calendar, just by coming home from school and seeing that my mom had moved all this stuff outside to air and had the windows open, and she had scrubbed and polished every nook and cranny of the house until it was sparkling. It was spring cleaning time, and this was a ritual in our household as I was growing up. However, that isn't a ritual that transferred to our household today. And as I'm approaching this time of major transition in my life, I'm sort of sorry that we didn't start doing this the spring cleaning thing more regularly, because it would certainly help the process. Excuse me. It would certainly help the process that lies ahead. For instance, my office at St. Luke's has been my home away from home for almost 30 years. And in that office, I have 4 bookcases that are filled with books. Many of them out of date. Even my textbooks from seminary are there, and some other kind of classics that I collected. And what I know is I have to get rid of them because my office at home, which is where I do most of my work and have most of the resources I use now, it's filled with bookshelves, and they're all full too. So there's no space, there's nowhere for it to go. So I'm going to have to do some major cleaning there. And then there's my desk. Actually, those 2 desks, the one at church and the one at home. I have some stacks that are kind of accumulated around there. And actually, when I was working on this sermon, I happened to become a little bit more aware of all this, and so I started looking at one particular stack, and I thought, I can deal with that. And so I started going through it, and it was filled with periodicals and articles that were way outdated and totally irrelevant, and I was able to get rid of those quite easily. It was a pretty simple thing to do. So, clearing the clutter is a hard task. It's time-consuming, but it's an important thing to do, too. In fact, I was thinking back to, 8 or 10 years ago now, we brought a dumpster into our driveway, and we actually cleared out the attic and the basement and the garage. And, we took things that were usable to Goodwill, but then the rest of it went in this dumpster. And I can't tell you how freeing that was. It was just an incredible sense of getting rid of the things that were in our way, that were not useful to us and not really helpful at all to us. And as I thought about it, it's really almost a holy task to do that. There is that sense of opening things up and opening ourselves up to be able to receive what life has to bring to us. And at the same time, it's a loving thing to do because it shows care for ourselves and care for those that we love, the people that we want to be around. And there's an interesting thing we discover when we start to sort through and clear out the clutter in our lives. There are things that we hold on to that we once thought had great value and great importance to us, and then we begin to realize that they aren't that important to us now. Things that we thought were absolutely precious and we couldn't do without or be without just don't measure up to being the most valuable things that we want to have. And we do discover things that are just not usable for us, but they're certainly usable for others that we can pass on. And then, of course, there are those things that don't work at all that we needed to have gotten rid of 10 years ago that we can pass along too. The reality is both our homes and our lives are filled with clutter that would do us well to get rid of those, to move those aside so that we can be open to what comes next. And in a sort of circuitous way, I think that's what the Bible passage we have for this morning is talking about. Now, this is Paul in a letter to the Colossians. And he's really urging his readers, his listeners, to really know what it's like to follow the way of Jesus, to live the way Jesus instructed us to live and showed us how to live. And that means that very often we have to cast off and get rid of things the way they were, to clear away that kind of clutter that may hold us back and hold us down, to make way for the new being, the newness that can come to us. Now, this is how our version reads. But now you must get rid of all these things: anger, passion, and hateful feelings. No insults or obscene talk must ever come from your lips. Do not lie to one another, for you have put off the old self with its habits and have put on the new self. Now, clearly, Paul is talking about our inner being, that which we recognize as holding us down, holding us back, that we need to get rid of, to move it aside, and to move it out of our lives in order for us to have the kind of life that God wants us to have. Now, there are some, in some of the reading and study that I did in preparation for today, there are some writers who say that our outward circumstances really reflect our inward state of being, and vice versa, that they really are reflections of one another. And one writer by the name of Aaron Rooney Dolan said this: clutter is anything that gets in the way of what matters most to you. It can certainly be material, unwanted trinkets and clothes that no longer fit, but clutter also can be spiritual, emotional, and psychological. And a blogger shared a similar thought with these words: we hold on to so much stuff that weighs us down and makes us feel bad: grudges, regrets, outdated dreams, crummy beliefs about ourselves, even ratty clothes that make us feel bad, but we just don't get rid of them for some reason. It's heavy and yucky, and all it takes is a decision to not carry it around anymore. Well, I'm guessing that most of us have some of that clutter in our lives, both in our homes and in our own personal lives. And when it comes time to clearing the clutter, each of us will make different decisions about what we keep and what we let go of. But the important thing is that we begin the process of sorting it out and moving it forward. And there are some things that were brought up in the Bible passage that maybe are things to pay attention to. Anger, for example. I can't say it. Anger, for example, is what I'm trying to say. You know, maybe we're carrying with us a sort of low level of anger. We may not be aware of it until it erupts in some surprising ways, and maybe at inopportune times. Or maybe we can recognize that we're carrying some anger and then realize we're pointing it in the wrong direction. We're blaming someone or having anger towards someone or something that may not be responsible for the anger we're carrying. We may even direct it toward ourselves and be very angry, bitter, unhealthy people, unhappy people, and not living the life we're intended to live. So anger is one of those things that we need to probably get rid of and clear the way for us. And then take grief, for example. Now, grief is a normal, healthy response to the loss of someone we love. And yet there's a way in which grief can also become unhealthy if we become kind of mired in it, and we engage in self-pity, and we keep going on and on about it, and we keep living in the past and aren't at the point where we can be even in the present, let alone to think about the future. There are other things we do too. We make mistakes and we have our failures in life, and sometimes we just simply won't let go of them. We beat ourselves up, and we have regrets and remorse for what we've done. We feel guilty, and we carry that guilt around with us. And there comes a time when we really have to find a way to let it go and to move away and to let it be gone from us. And then there are those things that we get into sort of self-doubt or negative self-talk. And we begin to feel that we're not good enough. We're not good enough for anyone or anything. And we begin to let these fears take on monstrous proportions around us. And our worries and our anxieties begin to weigh us down. And we wind up stuck, pretty badly stuck. Those are all things that can hold us down and things that we need to get rid of. And sometimes that clutter in our lives, in our homes or in our lives, are things that we need to be aware of and to get rid of those. Now, if we go about cleaning our house, if we do some spring cleaning and try to clear away the clutter in our homes, we can't just move it from one place to another. It can't go from one room to this closet to somewhere else. We really have to get rid of it. We have to move it. And the same thing is true of the clutter in our lives. We can't just move it into another part or into another category and then keep going back to it. It won't do any good. It won't clear us to live the kind of life we're intended to live. We really have to get rid of it. But how do we do that? How do we ever go about doing that? Well, there are several suggestions that have been made for how we can clear away the clutter. And one of them is to go about physically getting rid of those things around us, in our surroundings, that hold us back and that really kind of make a mess of things and don't let us keep moving forward. Maybe in that physical act of clearing away the clutter that's outward around us, we begin to understand what we need to do to clear away the clutter inside it. Maybe at least it's something worth a try. Or maybe if we're a different kind of person, we're someone who has to really sit down and sort of assess and analyze what is it that's going on in us? What is it that is really the clutter in our inward lives? And maybe we need to write them down. Are there relationships that are draining us? Are there things that distract us? Are there thoughts that seem to consume us? And maybe we put them on a list or write them in a journal and then begin to try to figure out how we go about letting go of those things that do hold us down and hold us back in such difficult ways. We really have to take action. And what I'm saying is that we have to be deliberate about it. It has to be an intentional act. We may have to decide that we need to change our minds or change our attitudes about something. We may have to do something more visible about it. Say, for example, we're some of those people who have this anger that goes around in us, and something happens that begins to ignite that anger. We've got to have an intentional decision that we're not going to let it erupt and that we need to deal with it in a positive way. Maybe it's taking some time before we respond. Maybe it's really praying about it and trying to think about how we deal with it. But it's not instantaneously letting that anger erupt. We have to practice it. We have to begin to live that way. If there are some of those negative kinds of things, those thoughts that keep plaguing us, maybe we need to put those down and then set those aside and designate some time to really focus on it so we can let it go. And if none of those processes work, then I think it's helpful to have an outside party, a counselor, a trusted person who will, in fact, listen to us and see things that we can't see and help us sort it out and begin to get rid of all the stuff that's in our lives that holds us back from living the way God intends us to live. You see, there's a great benefit that comes when we clean out the clutter, whether it's in our homes or in our personal lives. For one thing, it helps us clarify what really is important and what matters to us. It has a way of freeing us and giving us the chance to have some space, to offer newness to come into our lives, for God to come into our lives, for peace and harmony and all kinds of hope and love that can be a part of our lives if we get all this other stuff out of it. So, how about it? Let's do some spring cleaning.